The wind came down from the Wyoming mountains that night like a living thing, slamming against Eli Mercer's cabin. With the force of a dozen angry fists, snow whipped across the valley, the kind that blinded a man even with his eyes open. No one traveled in weather like this. No one survived outside for long. Eli sat close to the iron stove, mending an old leather bridle, listening to the storm scream around him like it wanted inside. Then came the knock. It was so soft at first he thought it was only a branch breaking loose. But the second knock came harder, shaky and unsure, but real. Eli stood slowly, lifted his Winchester from its pegs, and walked to the door. No one knocked on a man's cabin during a storm like this, unless something was terribly wrong. "Who's there?" he called. A thin woman's voice pushed through the wind. "Please help." Eli pulled the door open, and the storm nearly tore it from his hands. Snow swirled inside like white smoke. A figure stood on the porch, half buried in frost. Her dress was frozen stiff, her hair packed with ice, and her lips were so pale they frightened him. She clutched a small carpet bag to her chest like it was the last thing she owned. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He grabbed her arm, thin even through the frozen wool, and pulled her inside. She stumbled, shaking so hard her teeth rang like tiny bells. Eli slammed the door shut and braced it against the wind. "Get those wet clothes off," he said, pulling a flannel shirt from a peg. "They'll kill you faster than a bullet out here." He turned his back while she struggled out of the frozen dress. He fed more wood into the stove until it glowed bright. When he turned again, she was wrapped in his shirt and clutching the blanket he handed her. Color had returned to her face, but not much. "Sit close to the fire," he said. "Drink this." He poured her a cup of hot coffee, holding it steady because her hands shook too badly. She sipped slowly, letting the warmth sink into her bones. Eli ladled thick bean soup into a tin bowl and watched as she ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. Only when her breathing steadied did he ask, "Why were you out in that storm?" She looked up, and he saw eyes the color of summer sage, shadowed by something deeper. "My name is Maggie Doyle," she said. "I came from Boston to marry Owen Blackledge." Eli froze. Everyone in the valley knew Owen Blackledge, the biggest rancher around. Greedy, hard, a man who saw people as property more than souls. He changed his mind, she continued quietly. "He took one look at me at Roland Station and said I wasn't fit for ranch work. He handed me coach fare and sent me back toward town. The hotel wouldn't take me without more money, and the station master said the next coach east wouldn't come for a week. So you tried to walk," Eli said. She nodded. "I didn't know the storm would come this fast." "You're a mail-order bride," he said gently. "Was," she corrected. "Now I'm nothing. Just someone who sold everything she owned for a promise that wasn't real." Eli checked the shutters as the wind hammered them again. He added more wood to the fire. "This is Eli Mercer's cabin," he said. "You can stay here until the weather clears. No charge, no questions." She looked around the one-room cabin. The tools hung neat on the walls. His bed sat in the corner with his mother's quilt folded at the foot. Everything simple, everything clean, everything honest. "I can work for my keep," she said. "Cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden." "You're not a burden," he replied. "You're a person in trouble." "That's enough." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." "You take the bed," Eli said, grabbing his buffalo robe. "I'll sleep by the stove." "I couldn't." "You can and you will." His voice left no room for argument. "I've slept on colder ground than this." She finally settled onto the bed while he banked the fire for the night. Outside, the wind kept screaming, trying to tear the roof loose, but the cabin held. Eli had chinked every seam with his own hands. Nothing short of God himself was pulling it apart. In the quiet, her voice came again, soft and careful. "Why didn't you ask more questions about why he really sent me away?" Eli stared into the fire. "Because a man like Owen Blackledge doesn't change his mind without a reason. And whatever the real reason was, it wasn't you." Silence stretched between them. Then, small as a breath, she asked, "Do you think I'm suitable?" Eli didn't turn around. "I think you're alive. That's the only thing that matters tonight." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He didn't look back. Some things folks needed to feel alone with, even when they weren't. Long before dawn, the wind finally eased. Snow still fell thick, but gentle now. Eli rose quietly, rebuilt the fire, and started breakfast. Maggie woke to the smell of biscuits and coffee. "Roads won't clear for days," he said without turning. "You're safe here until then." She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and watched him cook. For the first time since leaving Boston, her breathing didn't hurt. Outside, the world lay buried in snow. Inside, something small and fragile had begun. The storm passed, but winter still pressed heavy on the valley. Over the next few days, Eli and Maggie settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. She cooked breakfast while he fetched firewood. She mended his shirts while he repaired harness leather. They moved around the cabin like people who had known each other longer than a week. On the third morning, Eli looked out the frost-covered window. "The cows need checking. One of the heifers is close to calving." "I'll come with you," Maggie said. "You don't need to go out in that cold." "I need to be useful," she replied. "Please let me help." He hesitated, then nodded. He handed her his extra coat, which nearly swallowed her whole, and found old boots that fit after she stuffed rags into the toes. They stepped outside into a white world. Snow still stood shoulder-high where Eli had shoveled a path to the barn. Inside, warm breath from the cattle hung in the air like fog. Maggie held the lantern, while Eli ran practiced hands along the pregnant heifer's side. "Not today," he murmured. "But soon." "She's beautiful," Maggie said softly. "She's profitable," Eli corrected. She glanced up at him. "You can say she's beautiful. It won't break your cowboy code." For the first time since she arrived, Eli smiled. "Fine. She's beautiful and profitable." Maggie laughed, and the sound warmed him more than the stove ever had. Back in the cabin, she taught him how to bank the fire properly for bread making. Her starter bubbled softly in a small crock. When their hands brushed reaching for the damper, both paused, but neither stepped away. That afternoon, she sat in the rocker mending his shirts, needle flying, while he carved a wooden spoon for her. The silence between them felt full, not empty. That night, the temperature dropped so low the nails in the wall snapped like twigs. Cold crept into every corner. Maggie tried to hide her shivers beneath the quilt, but Eli heard her teeth chatter. "This is foolish," she whispered. "You take your bed back. I'll sit by the fire. You'll freeze by the stove," he said. "We both will." She didn't argue. Her lips were too cold to move. Eli made a choice then. Practical, not improper. "I'm going to sit on the bed on top of the covers. We'll share the buffalo robe. Body heat's the only way we get through the night." Silence followed then. Softly. "All right." He sat against the headboard and pulled the robe over them. She leaned against his side, small and trembling. Slowly, carefully, he put his arm around her shoulders. "Better?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. Outside, the storm howled. Inside the cabin, they warmed each other in quiet peace. Near dawn, Maggie slept lightly against him. Eli sat still, watching the first gray light creep across the cabin floor. By morning, the worst of the cold had eased, but something between them had shifted, settled into a quiet understanding. Neither of them spoke aloud. When their hands brushed at the stove, neither pulled away. When she reached around him for the coffee pot, he stepped aside just enough, not too far. Later, she found his mother's Bible on the shelf. "I can read aloud, if you'd like," she said. "My students always said I had a good reading voice." He washed behind the blanket she hung for privacy and listened as her voice filled the cabin, soft and steady. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Her words stayed with him long after the book was closed. That evening, she looked at him across the small table. "Eli, if Owen comes looking for me, what then?" "Then he'll find you here," Eli answered. "Safe, warm, and under no claim of his." "I'm not something to be claimed." "No," he said quietly, "you're not. And that's something Owen Blackidge will learn if he comes knocking." On the fifth morning, horses appeared down the trail, dark shapes moving fast through the snow. Eli's stomach tightened. Trouble had found them. He ushered Maggie inside without a word. She understood and moved quickly, not running but not slow either. Owen Blackidge rode up with Sheriff Amos Hale and 2 hired men. Eli stood on the porch, rifle within reach but not in hand. "Eli," Owen said, tipping his hat like this was friendly business. "Heard you've been harboring stolen property." Eli didn't move. "Nothing stolen on my land. My mail-order bride went missing," Owen snapped. "She's mine under the law." The cabin door opened. Maggie stepped onto the porch, her blue dress mended, hair pinned proper. She stood tall despite the cold trembling in her hands. "I am not yours," she said. "You abandoned me at the crossroads. Your own paper says the agreement was ended." She handed a letter to the sheriff. Amos Hale read it slowly. "Owen," he said, "this says right here you terminated the arrangement. She coerced me," Owen barked. "Threatened scandal." "I never spoke a single threat," Matthew replied calmly. One of the hired men muttered something ugly. Eli stepped forward, not raising his rifle, but placing himself between Maggie and the men. "Careful," Eli said. "This doesn't need to get loud." Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle, are you here of your own free will?" "I am." "Anyone forcing you to stay?" "No." "Anyone taking liberties?" Maggie's voice didn't shake. "Mr. Mercer has been respectful and proper in every way." Owen's face burned red. "The valley will talk. You'll be a scandal." "Let them talk," Eli said. "Facts won't change." The moment stretched tight as wire. Snow settled. Horses stomped nervously. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Owen yanked his reins. "This isn't over." But he didn't win that day. Owen rode away angry, but trouble stayed behind. The valley buzzed with gossip. Some believed Owen's lies. Others stood with Eli and Maggie. No matter what people said, one simple truth remained. They were 2 good people trying to survive a storm bigger than weather. The next morning, a dead chicken lay on the porch. No mistake. A warning. Maggie looked at Eli through the window. "Teach me to shoot." He studied her. She wasn't a helpless woman from Boston anymore. She was someone ready to stand her ground. "All right," he said. Behind the cabin, he showed her how to hold the Winchester steady, how to breathe out slow before pulling the trigger. She learned fast. By the end of the day, she could hit a tin can 3 times out of 5. "Not bad for a schoolteacher," Eli said. "Not bad for anyone," she answered. That night, they sat quietly by the fire. Tommy Bright, one of Owen's younger hired hands, slipped by to warn them. Owen was stirring trouble in town, calling Eli a thief and Maggie a woman with loose morals. But Tommy also said the valley was divided. Good folks didn't like what Owen had done. The truth was spreading. They didn't speak of it, but both understood the same thing. The world was closing in, demanding answers they hadn't figured out yet. "We could marry," Eli said at last, staring into the fire. It would stop the talk. Maggie looked at him for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" He met her eyes, steady and honest. "If we marry, it won't be because of fear or gossip. It'll be because we choose it." She nodded softly. "Then we wait." And wait they did. Word reached Reverend Cole, and he came with Sheriff Hale to warn them. Owen was pushing hard, trying to get the judge to declare Maggie his runaway bride. Legal pressure. Social pressure. Every kind of pressure. "I want to speak at church on Sunday," Maggie said suddenly. "Let the town hear the truth from my own mouth." Reverend Cole blinked. "Women don't usually address the congregation. Women also don't usually get abandoned in a storm to die," Maggie said. "I have a right to defend my name." Sunday came cold and bright, the church filled with neighbors, curiosity thick as dust. Owen sat up front like he owned the place. Eli and Maggie took the back row. After the sermon, Reverend Cole gestured toward her. "Miss Doyle has something to say." Maggie stood and walked forward, holding Owen's letters in her hands. She told him everything.